My name is Marvella Gant, and at 66 years old, I have carried these iron shackles longer than most folks have drawn breath. The metal has worn grooves in my ankles so deep that even when they're removed, the marks remain like permanent bracelets of my bondage. But today, Lord have mercy, today feels different. I wake before dawn in the cramped quarters I share with 12 other souls, the familiar ache in my bones singing its morning song. The Georgia heat is already pressing through the wooden slats, promising another scorching day in Master Whitfield's cotton fields. But as I stretch my weathered hands and feel the calluses that tell the story of 5 decades of unpaid labor, something stirs in my chest that I haven't felt in years. Hope. Yesterday, I overheard Master Whitfield talking to his overseer about debts. Bad debts. The kind that make white men pace and pull at their whiskers. Cotton prices have been falling, and the war rumors growing stronger each month. Even in our quarters, we whisper about President Lincoln and the changes coming like storm clouds on the horizon. Marvella, comes a soft voice in the darkness. It's young Sarah, barely 16, who arrived last month from a plantation in South Carolina. Her master sold her family's land, scattered them like seeds in the wind. She reminds me of myself at that age, all sharp elbows and sharper tongue, before this place taught me to bend without breaking. Child, you need to rest, I whisper back, though I know sleep comes hard when your mind is full of questions about tomorrow. I've learned to find peace in the small spaces between heartbeats, in the quiet moments before the bell rings and another day of survival begins. The morning bell clangs through the humid air, and I rise with the practiced efficiency of someone who's done this 10,000 times. My movements are slower now than they once were, but my mind, Lord knows my mind, is sharper than it's ever been. 66 years of watching and listening and remembering have taught me things that Master Whitfield, for all his education and fine clothes, will never understand. As I step outside, the other workers are already gathering, their faces showing the same mixture of resignation and quiet strength that I see in my own reflection in the water barrel each morning. There's old Jerome, who taught me to read using charcoal and tree bark when I was young and foolish enough to think knowledge might set me free. There's Mama Ruth, who's delivered half the babies on this plantation and buried too many of them too young. The overseer, Mr. Jameson, stands near the gate with his usual scowl and leather whip coiled at his side. He's a small man, made large by the authority given to him, the kind who feels powerful only when others are made to feel powerless. I've watched him for 20 years, learned his patterns, his weaknesses, his fears. Knowledge, I've discovered, is its own kind of freedom. You people move like molasses in January, Jameson barks, though we're moving at exactly the pace we always move, fast enough to avoid his whip, slow enough to preserve our strength for the long day ahead. Master's got visitors coming today, and he wants this place looking proper. Visitors. My ears prick at this information. In my experience, visitors often mean opportunity, though not always the kind you'd hope for. Sometimes they bring news from the outside world. Sometimes they bring buyers looking for fresh bodies to work their own land. But sometimes, and this is what makes my heart beat a little faster, sometimes they bring desperation. As we walk toward the fields, I notice Master Whitfield's house in the distance, grand and white against the morning sky. The windows catch the early sunlight, like watching eyes. I've cleaned those windows, scrubbed those floors, served meals in that dining room while invisible to the conversations happening around me. Invisible, but never unhearing. The cotton plants stretch before us like an ocean of green and white, each row representing hours of backbreaking labor under the unforgiving sun. My fingers automatically find the leather pouch I keep hidden beneath my dress, a small collection of coins and trinkets I've managed to gather over the years. Not stolen, mind you, but found, earned through small favors, saved from the rare occasions when Master Whitfield's guilt moved him to distribute a few pennies at Christmas. It's not much, this small collection of metal and hope, but it's mine. In a world where I own nothing, not my time, not my body, not even the children who might come from it, these few coins represent something precious: choice. As I bend to pick the first cotton bolls of the day, my fingers working with the automatic precision of decades, I let my mind wander to the conversation I overheard yesterday. Master Whitfield owes money to men in Savannah, more money than this plantation has made in 3 seasons. And desperate men, I've learned, sometimes make desperate bargains. The sun climbs higher, and sweat begins to trace familiar paths down my back. Around me, my fellow workers move through the rows with their own rhythms of survival. We don't speak much during work. Jameson discourages conversation, but we communicate in other ways. A glance that says, "Be careful." A subtle gesture that points out which plants have the best yield. Small acts of care that help us all survive another day. By midday, when the heat becomes almost unbearable, I've filled 3 baskets with cotton, and my mind has filled with something else. A plan. It's dangerous and probably foolish, but at 66, I've learned that sometimes foolish is the only kind of courage left to you. Tonight, when the quarters are quiet and the guards are lazy with heat and whiskey, I'm going to approach Master Whitfield with an offer. These shackles that have bound my ankles for so many years, I'm going to buy my freedom from them. And maybe, if I'm clever and lucky and the Lord sees fit to smile on an old woman's dreams, I might just discover that freedom comes with unexpected gifts. The evening air carries the scent of magnolia and the distant sound of Master Whitfield's dinner guests laughing on the veranda. I've been waiting behind the kitchen garden for nearly an hour, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird. At my age, fear should be a familiar companion, but tonight it feels fresh and sharp, cutting through decades of careful numbness. Through the kitchen window, I can see Mary Catherine, the house cook, cleaning the last of the dinner dishes. She's been here almost as long as I have, and we've shared the unspoken understanding that comes from surviving in the same small hell for most of our lives. When she notices me in the garden, her eyes widen with concern, then narrow with understanding. She knows what I'm about to do. The guests, 3 men in fine suits who've been drinking Master Whitfield's bourbon and discussing cotton prices all evening, finally take their leave. I watch their carriage disappear down the oak-lined drive before making my move. My ankles protest as I walk, the iron shackles clicking softly with each step, a sound that's been the soundtrack to my life for so long I barely notice it anymore. I approach the back door of the big house, the servants' entrance that I've used thousands of times to carry meals, clean chambers, and tend to the endless needs of a family that's never seen me as more than a useful tool. But tonight, I'm not here to serve. Tonight, I'm here to negotiate. Master Whitfield is in his study, slumped in the leather chair that belonged to his father and his father's father. The room smells of tobacco and old books and the particular scent of wealth that comes from never having to wonder where your next meal will come from. He looks older than his 50-some years, his face drawn with worry lines that weren't there when I first came to this plantation as a girl of 16. I knock softly on the doorframe. "Master Whitfield, sir? Might I have a word?" He looks up from the papers scattered across his desk, bills and notices and documents that speak of a man whose world is slowly crumbling around him. His surprise at seeing me is genuine. In all my years here, I've never requested a private audience. "Marvella? What are you doing in the house at this hour?" I step forward, my hands clasped in front of me in the posture of deference that's been beaten into every gesture I make. But inside, I'm standing tall. "Sir, I've been thinking about your situation, and I believe I might be able to help." His eyebrows rise. In the lamplight, I can see the red veins in his eyes, the way his hands shake slightly from too much drink and too much worry. "Help? What could you possibly know about my situation?" This is the moment where everything changes or everything stays the same. I reach into my dress and withdraw the small leather pouch I've kept hidden for so many years. The coins inside clink softly as I set it on his desk. "I know you owe money to Mr. Harrison and his associates in Savannah. I know the cotton crop this year won't be enough to satisfy them. And I know that desperate times sometimes call for creative solutions." He stares at the pouch, then at me, as if seeing me clearly for the first time in 50 years. "Where did you get this money?" "Honestly earned over the years, sir. Small coins given at Christmas, payment for extra work, things found and returned to you that might have gone into my pocket instead." Each word is carefully chosen, true but incomplete. I don't mention the times I've overcharged visiting merchants by a penny or two, or the small items that fell off wagons and found their way to my hiding place instead of his coffers. He opens the pouch and counts the contents. $43.67. A fortune by the standards of my world, barely enough to matter in his. But I can see in his eyes that every dollar matters now. What exactly are you proposing, Marvella? I want to purchase my freedom, sir. These shackles have been on my ankles for 50 years. I'm offering to buy them from you. The silence stretches between us like a taut rope. Outside, night birds call to each other in the oak trees, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. Normal sounds of a normal evening, but nothing about this moment feels normal. You want to buy your shackles? His voice carries a mixture of amusement and confusion. Marvella, those shackles aren't worth $40. They're worth maybe $2 in scrap iron. Then you'll be making quite a profit, sir. I keep my voice steady, respectful, but there's steel underneath that I've never let him hear before. And you'll have $43 toward your debt to Mr. Harrison. More importantly, you'll have the satisfaction of knowing you did right by someone who served your family faithfully for 5 decades. He leans back in his chair, studying me with new eyes. I can almost see the calculations running through his mind. The money he needs, the social implications of freeing an elderly slave woman, the precedent it might set with the other workers. And what would you do with your freedom, Marvella? You're 66 years old. Where would you go? How would you survive? It's a fair question, and one I've thought about extensively. I have skills, sir. I can cook, clean, sew, tend gardens, care for children and the elderly. There are places in the world that would pay an honest wage for honest work. Places where they'd hire an old Negro woman? The word stings, as it always does, but I don't flinch. Places where they'd hire an experienced worker who knows her trade and does it well. He's quiet for a long moment, fingering the coins in the pouch. Finally, he looks up at me with something that might almost be respect. You know this doesn't make you truly free, don't you? Without papers, without legal documentation, you'd still be at the mercy of any white man who decided to question your status. I know, sir, but it would make me free of these. I gesture to my ankles, to the iron that's marked my skin and limited my steps for so many years. And sometimes, freedom starts with small steps. He nods slowly, and I see the moment when he makes his decision. Very well, Marvella. We have a deal. As he reaches for the key that will unlock my shackles, I feel something I haven't felt in decades. The dizzy, terrifying, wonderful sensation of possibility opening up before me, like a door I'd forgotten existed. The morning sun feels different on my face when I wake up, brighter somehow, as if the world has shifted overnight. When I sit up and move my feet, there's no metallic clink, no familiar weight dragging at my ankles. The absence of the shackles is almost more noticeable than their presence ever was, like the silence after a constant noise finally stops. My ankles are raw and tender where the iron sat for so many years, the skin pale and scarred in perfect circles that tell the story of 5 decades in bondage. I touch these marks gently, tracing the indentations with my fingertips. They may fade with time, but I suspect they'll never disappear completely. Perhaps that's fitting. Some things should leave permanent marks, should be remembered in the flesh as well as in the mind. The other workers in our quarters are beginning to stir, and I realize I need to be careful about how I explain my changed circumstances. Freedom, even the partial kind I've purchased, can be a dangerous thing to display too openly. It might give others hope they can't afford to carry, or worse, it might make some feel that I've betrayed our shared struggle by finding a way out that they can't access. Sarah is the first to notice. Her young eyes are sharp, trained by necessity to spot any change in our carefully controlled environment. She sees my bare ankles, and her mouth opens in a small O of surprise. "Miss Marvella," she whispers, "where are your—" "Shh, child." I place a gentle hand on her arm. Sometimes the Lord works in mysterious ways, and sometimes old women find ways to lighten their load. But we don't need to announce it to the world. You understand? She nods, but I can see the questions burning in her eyes. Questions about how and why, and whether this might mean hope for her too. I don't have answers that won't break her heart or raise expectations I can't fulfill. So I simply squeeze her hand and begin my morning routine. Walking to the fields without shackles feels like learning to walk all over again. My gait has adapted over the decades to accommodate the weight and restriction of the iron. And now I find myself taking steps that are too small, expecting resistance that no longer exists. It's a strange sensation, liberation that feels like stumbling until you learn to trust it. Master Whitfield is already in the fields when we arrive, which is unusual. Typically, he observes from a distance, letting Jameson handle the day-to-day supervision of our labor. But today, he stands near the cotton rows, his hands clasped behind his back, watching as we begin our work. When his eyes meet mine, there's something different in his expression. Not kindness exactly, but perhaps a recognition that our relationship has fundamentally changed. Jameson, however, seems oblivious to any change. He distributes the morning's assignments with his usual mixture of impatience and casual cruelty, his whip serving as both tool and threat. When he gets to me, he pauses, squinting at my ankles with confusion. "Where are your restraints, old woman?" Before I can answer, Master Whitfield steps forward. "That's been handled, Jameson. Marvella will continue her regular duties without them." The overseer's face flushes red, the way it always does when he feels his authority has been undermined. He looks from Master Whitfield to me and back again, clearly wanting to ask questions, but not daring to challenge his employer's decision directly. "Sir, if the others will see what they see," Master Whitfield interrupts, "and they'll understand that good service over many years sometimes earns certain considerations." It's a delicate way of explaining the transaction without admitting to the financial desperation that made it necessary. I appreciate the fiction, even as I understand the reality beneath it. As the day progresses, I'm acutely aware of how the absence of Shackles changes everything about my work. I can move more quickly between the cotton rows, my steps no longer restricted to the shuffle that iron chains require. My balance is better, my legs less tired at the end of each row. It's remarkable how much energy was being spent simply in the act of carrying that extra weight. But the physical changes are nothing compared to the psychological ones. Each step feels like a choice now, rather than a predetermined path. When I reach the end of a row and turn to begin the next one, there's a moment, just a brief instant, when I could theoretically keep walking, could head toward the tree line and the road beyond. I don't, of course. I'm not foolish enough to think that the absence of shackles makes me truly free, not in a world where the color of my skin serves as its own form of chains. But the possibility exists now in a way it never did before, and that possibility changes something fundamental in how I move through the world. During the midday break, old Jerome approaches me while we rest in the shade of a large oak tree. He's been watching me all morning, his wise eyes taking in every detail of my changed circumstances. "Marvella," he says quietly, "you've done something brave today. But brave and smart aren't always the same thing. You need to be careful how you carry this new freedom of yours." I nod, understanding his concern. Jerome has survived on this plantation for nearly 70 years by being observant, by understanding the delicate balance of power that keeps us all alive. His warning comes from love and experience. "I know, Jerome. I'm not planning to do anything foolish." "Good, but I also know you, child. You've got a mind that doesn't stop working, and now that mind is going to start seeing possibilities it couldn't see before. Just remember, the most dangerous thing a person like us can have is hope without wisdom." His words stay with me as the afternoon stretches on. Hope without wisdom. Yes, I can see how that could be dangerous. But as I work through the cotton rows, my unshackled feet finding their rhythm on the dusty earth, I can't help but think that sometimes wisdom comes from taking the first small step toward something better, even when you can't see where the path might lead. Tonight, I'll walk back to the quarters with the same careful humility I've practiced for 50 years. But inside, something has changed forever. Inside, I'm already planning the next step in a journey I've only just begun to imagine. 3 weeks have passed since I bought my freedom from those iron shackles, and I've settled into a new rhythm of movement and possibility. My ankles have healed, the angry red marks fading to pale scars that catch the light when I walk. Each morning, I still reach down to touch them, still marvel at their absence, still whisper a small prayer of gratitude for small mercies. Today, Master Whitfield has assigned me to work the back 40, the section of cotton field that borders the old creek bed, where the soil is rich but the plants grow wild and unpredictable. It's considered punishment work, usually reserved for those who've shown defiance or laziness, but I requested it specifically. Something about that untamed section of land calls to me, maybe because it reminds me of what I might become now that my own growth is no longer artificially constrained. The morning air is thick with humidity and the promise of afternoon thunderstorms. As I work my way through the cotton rows, my fingers practiced and efficient despite my age, I let my mind wander to the conversations I've been overhearing in Master Whitfield's house. The debts haven't disappeared with my small contribution. If anything, they seem to be growing larger and more urgent. Twice this week, men in fine coats have visited, their voices carrying the particular tone of creditors who've moved beyond patience into threat. Sarah works the row next to mine, her young hands quick and sure. She's learned not to ask direct questions about my changed circumstances, but I catch her watching me sometimes with an expression that mixes hope with something that might be envy. I understand it. At 16, she has decades of bondage ahead of her, while I've managed to purchase at least the symbol of my freedom. "Miss Marvella," she says during our brief water break, do you think things are really going to change? The way folks talk about President Lincoln and the war?" I pause before answering, remembering Jerome's warning about hope without wisdom. Change comes whether we're ready for it or not, child. The question is whether we're prepared to recognize it when it arrives, and whether we're clever enough to use it to our advantage. She nods thoughtfully, then returns to her work with the focused intensity that's helped her survive this long. I watch her for a moment, remembering myself at that age, remembering the dreams I had to bury in order to endure. Maybe, if I'm very careful and very lucky, I can help ensure that she doesn't have to bury hers quite so deep. The afternoon brings the promised storms, sudden and violent, as they often are in this part of Georgia. The other workers run for shelter in the equipment shed, but I find myself drawn to continue working in the rain. There's something liberating about the water washing over me, about the way the storm makes the whole world feel wild and ungoverned for a few precious minutes. It's while I'm picking cotton in this downpour, my dress soaked through and my hair streaming water, that I notice something unusual about the soil near the creek bed. The heavy rain has washed away years of accumulated dirt and debris, revealing what looks like the corner of something buried beneath a particularly large cotton plant. I look around quickly to make sure I'm alone, then kneel in the mud to investigate. My fingers, made sensitive by decades of work, can feel the outline of something hard and rectangular buried maybe a foot beneath the surface. Something that definitely doesn't belong in a cotton field. The smart thing to do would be to report this discovery to Master Whitfield or Jameson. The safe thing would be to cover it back up and pretend I never saw it. But at 66, with the marks of shackles still fresh on my ankles and the taste of partial freedom still sweet on my tongue, I find that smart and safe no longer seem like the most important considerations. I work quickly but carefully, using my hands and a sharp stick to excavate around the buried object. The rain continues to fall, providing cover for my activities and washing away the evidence of my digging. What emerges from the red Georgia clay is a wooden box about the size of a large book, wrapped in what was once probably oilcloth, but has now mostly rotted away. The box is heavier than its size would suggest, and when I lift it, I can hear the soft clink of metal objects shifting inside. My heart begins to pound with a mixture of excitement and fear as I realize what I might have found. I wrap the box in my apron and make my way to a more secluded spot near the creek, where an old willow tree provides both shelter and concealment. My hands shake slightly as I work the corroded latch, partly from cold and partly from anticipation. Inside the box, nestled in what remains of some rotted fabric, are gold coins. Not the worn pennies and nickels of my small savings, but genuine gold pieces that catch what little light filters through the storm clouds and throw it back in rich, warm gleams. There are maybe 30 or 40 of them, along with what appears to be jewelry, rings, a necklace, earrings, and some official-looking papers that have somehow survived the decades in their wooden protection. I sit in stunned silence for several minutes, the rain pattering on the willow leaves above me while I try to process what I've discovered. This isn't found money or dropped coins. This is a deliberately hidden fortune, buried here for reasons I can only guess at. And now, through chance and storm and the strange logic of providence, it's in my hands. The papers, when I unfold them carefully, appear to be some kind of bank documents and property deeds, though the writing is faded and difficult to read in the dim light. What I can make out suggests that this cash belonged to someone named Harrison, the same name as one of Master Whitfield's creditors. As I rewrap the treasure and consider my options, one thing becomes clear. This discovery changes everything, not just for me, but potentially for everyone on this plantation. The question is how to use this gift, and make no mistake, I believe it is a gift, delivered to me at exactly the moment when I'm finally free enough to accept it, in a way that brings good rather than harm. The storm is beginning to pass, and I can hear voices calling from the direction of the equipment shed. I hide the box carefully in a hollow at the base of the willow tree, marking the spot in my memory with the precision that comes from a lifetime of remembering important details that can't be written down. Tomorrow, I'll need to make some very careful decisions about what to do with this unexpected fortune. But tonight, I'll return to the quarters with mud on my hands and secrets in my heart, knowing that sometimes the earth gives back what has been taken from it, and sometimes an old woman's freedom is just the beginning of a much larger story. Sleep eludes me entirely that night. I lie on my thin mattress, listening to the soft breathing of the other women around me, while my mind races through possibilities and dangers in equal measure. The image of those gold coins burns behind my closed eyes, not just their beauty, but their weight, their promise, their terrible responsibility. By the time the morning bell rings, I've made several decisions. The first is that I cannot and will not keep this discovery to myself. The second is that I must be extraordinarily careful about who I trust with this knowledge. The third is that whatever I do with this fortune must serve more than just my own interests. I rise before dawn and make my way to the willow tree by the creek, moving carefully in the early morning darkness. The box is where I left it, undisturbed and somehow more real in daylight than it seemed during yesterday's storm. I count the coins more carefully this time. 42 gold pieces of various denominations, plus the jewelry and papers. More money than most people on this plantation will see in their entire lives. The documents are clearer in the morning light, and what I read makes my blood run cold. These are records of slave purchases and sales, dated from 15 years ago, signed by someone named Edmund Harrison, the same Harrison who has been pressuring Master Whitfield for payment. These papers suggest that Master Harrison once owned this plantation, or at least had significant financial interest in it, before some transaction transferred ownership to the Whitfield family. More disturbing are the marginal notes written in a different hand, detailing what appear to be planned escapes, routes north, and names of people who helped enslaved individuals reach freedom. This wasn't just a wealthy man's hidden treasure. It was evidence of Underground Railroad activity, hidden here by someone who knew the terrible danger such information represented. I wrap the box carefully and return to the quarters, my mind spinning with the implications of what I've found. This money could buy freedom for several people, but it could also bring down deadly scrutiny on everyone if discovered. The knowledge of the Underground Railroad connections could save lives or end them, depending on who possesses it. During the morning meal, thin gruel and hard bread that barely deserves the name of food, I catch old Jerome's eye across the crowded room. We've developed signals over the years, subtle communications that allow us to share important information without drawing attention. I give him the look that means, "I need to speak with you privately," and he responds with an almost imperceptible nod. We meet during the noon break, in the shadow of the equipment shed where the noise of tools being moved provides cover for our conversation. Jerome has been my mentor in the art of survival for decades, and if anyone can help me navigate this dangerous discovery, it's him. "Jerome," I begin quietly, "I need your counsel on something that could change lives, but could also end them." His weathered face grows serious. At 70, he's seen more than any person should have to see, survived more than seems possible. "What kind of trouble have you found, child?" I tell him everything. The discovery of the box, the coins, the papers, the connections to Harrison and the Underground Railroad. As I speak, I watch his expression shift from concern to amazement to deep worry. "Marvella," he says when I finish, "you found something that could be salvation or damnation, depending on how it's handled. That money could buy freedom for several of our people. But those papers, Lord have mercy, Those papers could get us all killed if they fall into the wrong hands. I know. That's why I need your wisdom. What do I do with it? He's quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant as he considers the options. First thing, you need to understand what those papers really mean. If this Harrison was helping people escape, and if Master Whitfield found out about it, that might explain how the Whitfields ended up owning this land. Could be Harrison had to flee north himself, left this buried here hoping to come back for it someday. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If Master Harrison was forced to abandon his property because of his Underground Railroad activities, and if Master Whitfield somehow acquired it through that abandonment, then the current financial crisis might be seen as a kind of justice. But it also means that using this money could be incredibly dangerous. There's something else, Jerome continues. Sarah mentioned to me that she's been having dreams about running north. That girl's spirit isn't going to be contained much longer, and if she tries to escape without proper help, she'll end up dead or worse. My heart clenches at this news. I've been watching Sarah carefully, seeing the signs of someone whose hope is becoming stronger than their fear. It's a dangerous transition for someone in our position. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe this fortune found you for a reason. Maybe it's meant to help that girl and others like her find their way to freedom. But it needs to be done carefully, with proper planning and connections. How do we even begin to make those connections? We don't know who to trust, who might still be active in helping people escape. Jerome smiles grimly. Actually, I might know someone. Remember Thomas, who used to work in Master Whitfield's house before he was sold off 3 years ago? Word came back that he made it to Pennsylvania, that he's been helping others find their way north. If we could get word to him. The conversation continues for another few minutes, but we're interrupted by the sound of Jameson's voice calling for the afternoon work to begin. As we separate, Jerome places a gentle hand on my arm. Marvella, you've carried the weight of iron chains for 50 years. Now you're carrying the weight of gold and the weight of other people's lives. Make sure you're strong enough for this burden, because once you start down this path, there's no turning back. As I return to the cotton fields for the afternoon's labor, his words echo in my mind. The weight of gold. Yes, that's exactly what this is. A different kind of chain, but a chain nonetheless. The question is whether I'm brave enough and wise enough to bear it, and whether I can use it to break other people's chains rather than simply forging new ones. That evening, as I lie on my mattress listening to the sounds of the quarters settling into sleep, I make my final decision. Tomorrow, I'll begin the delicate process of reaching out to the networks that might still exist, the people who might still be willing to risk everything to help others find freedom. The gold will be put to its intended use, not to enrich me, but to continue the work that Edmund Harrison started before he was forced to abandon it. And if that means taking risks that could cost me my life, well, at 66 years old, with the marks of shackles still fresh on my ankles, perhaps it's time to discover what my life is actually worth. 2 months have passed since I found the buried treasure, and the world around us has begun to shift in ways both subtle and dramatic. News travels slowly to our quarters, filtered through conversations overheard in the big house and whispered reports from traveling workers, but even we can sense that something fundamental is changing in the wider world. President Lincoln has issued his Emancipation Proclamation, though its effects haven't reached us here in rural Georgia. The war that seemed distant when I first purchased my shackles now feels close enough to touch, with Union forces reportedly moving through the Carolinas and Confederate soldiers passing through our county with increasing frequency. Master Whitfield's financial situation has worsened considerably. 3 times in the past month, I've watched from the kitchen windows as groups of serious men in dark suits have visited the plantation, their conversations with him growing more heated each time. The last group didn't even bother with pleasantries. They walked the property like they were already measuring it for their own purposes. Through careful planning and Jerome's connections, I've managed to make contact with Thomas in Pennsylvania. The process was terrifyingly complex. Messages hidden in market baskets passed through a network of sympathetic individuals that stretches from our plantation all the way to the Free States. But the connection has been established, and Thomas has confirmed that he can help people make the dangerous journey north. The cost, however, is substantial. $20 per person to cover guides, safe houses, transportation, and bribes. It's money I have thanks to the buried fortune, But each expenditure requires careful consideration. The 42 gold coins I found represent freedom for perhaps a dozen people if used wisely. Sarah has been the first to make the journey. 3 weeks ago, on a moonless night when the patrols were focused on a Confederate deserter hunt, she disappeared from the quarters like a ghost. The official story is that she ran off into the swamps and likely died. Master Whitfield posted notices offering a reward for her return, but his heart wasn't in the search. He has larger problems to worry about now, but I know better. Sarah is alive and free, working in a household in Philadelphia where Thomas arranged employment for her. The letter confirming her safe arrival, written in Thomas's careful script and hidden inside a sack of flour delivered to our kitchen, brought tears to my eyes that I had to explain away as being caused by the dust. Now, others are asking questions, quietly, carefully, but persistently. Young Marcus, who works in the stables and dreams of joining the Union Army. Old Emma, whose grandchildren were sold away last year and who has nothing left to keep her here except habit and fear. Even Jerome, though at 70, he worries he might be too old for such a dangerous journey. I've become the keeper of dangerous secrets and impossible hopes. The responsibility weighs on me more heavily than those iron shackles ever did. Every night, I lie awake calculating resources and risks, trying to determine who should go next and when it might be safe to attempt another escape. The decision is taken out of my hands on a Tuesday morning in early April, when Master Whitfield calls me to his study once again. This time, however, the atmosphere is entirely different from our previous negotiation. He looks haggard, desperate, and there are strangers in the room with him, the dark-suited men I've seen before, plus a woman in expensive clothes who examines me like I'm livestock. "Marvella," Master Whitfield begins, his voice strained. "These are my creditors from Savannah. They're here to assess the value of the plantation's assets. I understand immediately what this means. The debts have come due, and we are being evaluated as property to be sold to satisfy them. The partial freedom I purchased 2 months ago is about to become completely meaningless." The woman steps forward, her cold eyes taking inventory of my age, my health, my potential value in whatever market she represents. "How old are you, girl?" 66 years, ma'am." I keep my voice steady, respectful, though inside I'm calculating how quickly I can retrieve the hidden gold and how many people I can help escape before this situation becomes impossible. "She's too old to be worth much in the fields," one of the men comments, "but she might have some value as a house servant if she's trained properly." They discuss me as if I'm not standing right there, debating my worth in dollars and cents while I stand silent and plan their undoing. Because I've made a decision in this moment that changes everything. I will not be sold again. I will not spend whatever years I have left enriching people who see me as nothing more than a tool to be used and discarded. That evening, I meet with Jerome and the small group of people who've been quietly preparing for the possibility of escape. Marcus is there, his young face set with determination. Emma, clutching a small bag that contains the few possessions she can't bear to leave behind. 2 others, James and Rebecca, a young couple who've been secretly married in the eyes of God, if not the law. "It has to be tonight," I tell them quietly. "They're planning to sell us all to settle the debts. If we don't leave now, we may never get another chance." The logistics are complex and dangerous. 5 people traveling together are much more likely to be caught than 1 person traveling alone. But the alternative, being scattered to different plantations across the South, never to see each other again, is unacceptable. I distribute the gold carefully, giving each person enough to pay for their passage and support themselves during the first difficult weeks of freedom. What remains, I keep for myself and for future refugees who might need help. Thomas has arranged for a conductor to meet us at the old mill 10 miles north of here, Jerome explains, his voice barely above a whisper. From there, we'll travel in stages, safe house to safe house, until we reach Pennsylvania. As we prepare to leave everything we've ever known, I think about the strange path that brought me to this moment. From buying my shackles, to finding buried treasure, to organizing the escape of 6 people, it's been a journey I never could have imagined when I woke up in chains just a few months ago. We slip away in the darkness before dawn, 6 shadows moving through the Georgia countryside toward an uncertain but chosen future. Behind us, we leave the only home we've ever known. Ahead of us lies freedom. Terrifying, dangerous, precious freedom that we're finally brave enough to claim. At 66, I'm learning to walk without shackles for the second time. But now I'm not walking alone. And the path leads north toward morning, toward a place where the gold I found can be transformed into something more valuable than coins. The priceless gift of human dignity, freely chosen and courageously claimed. The sun rises behind us as we reach the mill where our conductor waits. And I realize that sometimes the most valuable treasure isn't what you find buried in the ground. It's what you discover you're capable of when you finally have the freedom to choose your own path. End of series author's note. This 6-chapter series explores themes of resilience, courage, and the complex nature of freedom through the eyes of Marvella Gant, an elderly enslaved woman who transforms a small act of personal liberation into a larger mission of helping others escape bondage. Set during the final years of American slavery, the story emphasizes the human dignity and strength that persisted even in the most dehumanizing circumstances, while acknowledging the brutal realities of the institution of slavery without sensationalizing or minimizing its horrors.